Think about how you move when you want to be, really powerful. Or think about what you do when you want to be incredibly fast.
Right, you probably think about putting in a lot more effort.
Exactly. Like, if you're like most people, your brain immediately defaults to a very specific set of physical commands. You think about trying harder,
Yeah, you think about flexing,
mm.
bracing your core.
gritting your teeth, putting
Yeah.
in this massive amount of conscious effort. You summon the energy.
But what if the actual secret to perfect natural movement requires the exact opposite approach?
Right. What if the key to moving with more power and more speed is actually doing significantly less?
It sounds so counterintuitive because we are culturally conditioned to equate physical capability with muscular tension.
Oh, absolutely. Our whole modern paradigm of fitness is based on this idea of, more.
Exactly. More tension, more load, more effort. But when you strip away that cultural conditioning and look purely at the biological mechanics,
That assumption just completely falls apart.
it really does. True efficiency doesn't come from forcing your muscles to do all the work. It comes from getting your muscles out of the way.
So your structure can actually do the work for you.
Right.
So we are taking a deep dive into the biomechanics of natural movement today. And we're pulling from this fascinating source document that completely reconstructs how the human body is designed to walk, stand, and, just navigate the world.
It's a brilliant framework. It bridges complex physical engineering like spinal hydraulics.
Which sounds crazy, right? Spinal hydraulics?
Yeah, fluid dynamics inside the body. And it bridges that with ancient Taoist philosophy.
Introducing these highly specific concepts like yielding to weight and maximum dynamic relaxation.
Which we're going to unpack today.
Right. The mission of this deep dive is to completely rebuild your understanding of the invisible mechanics operating inside your body every single time you take a step.
Because, we shift our weight thousands of times a day, right?
Yeah, and most of us never give it a second thought.
But if we zoom in on the microsecond between those shifts,
That tiny, tiny fraction of a second where weight transfers from one leg to the other.
exactly, we find the actual genesis of natural movement there.
Mm-hmm.
According to the author of our source document, who spent 40 years closely observing how living bodies navigate gravity.
40 years, that's a long time to watch people walk.
It is. But that imperceptible window of time is where they realized everything begins.
Let's focus on that observation period for a second, because watching people walk sounds mundane, but they weren't just casually people watching at the mall.
No, they were analyzing a massive spectrum of human movement.
Right, from toddlers who have just taken their first steps to the elderly to elite masters of martial arts.
And they were looking for a common denominator across all of them.
They wanted to know what like an 80-year-old Tai Chi master and an 18-month-old baby share that a stressed-out 30-year-old office worker has completely lost.
And what they discovered is this universal truth about biological efficiency.
Which is?
The crucial moment in any physical action isn't the exertion. It isn't the push or the pull. It is the brief instant when weight passes from one support to the other.
It's the small pause between efforts, the moment when the body stops doing and simply rests on its support.
Exactly. And the author notes that for a long time, they missed this pause entirely.
Because it's so brief.
Yeah, it's incredibly brief. We are trained to look at the big, flashy muscle contractions.
Reflexing.
Right. But natural movement doesn't begin in the moment of effort. It begins in the moment of rest.
I want to make this really tangible for you right now. If you're listening to this in a place where you can safely stand up, go ahead and stand.
Just shift your weight onto one leg calmly, like you're waiting in line at a coffee shop.
Right. The source material points out that in that specific instant, if you don't actively interfere with your own body,
Which is hard for us not to do.
it really is. But if you don't interfere, your physical structure settles slightly onto its support.
Gravity draws you downward.
You don't brace or catch yourself with your thigh muscles. You just release. And the floor beneath your foot receives your weight.
The precise terminology the text uses for this is yielding under load.
Yielding under load.
Yeah, and that yielding is the doorway to this entire paradigm.
It's quiet, it's brief, and it goes completely unnoticed until you train your nervous system to actually feel it.
Exactly.
I was trying to visualize the difference between how we normally move and what this yielding actually is. And the best comparison I could make is catching a falling heavy bag versus letting a heavy bag settle onto the floor.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because if someone tosses a 50-pound sandbag at your chest, your immediate instinct is to tense up.
Right, your muscles fire, you brace your
And
spine.
to aggressively catch the weight. And that is essentially how most of us walk.
Sadly, yes.
Every step is a miniature brace. We are constantly catching our own body weight with our muscles.
But if you take that same 50-pound sandbag and lower it until the bottom touches the floor and you just let go,
The bag just settles. It yields to the floor.
the floor takes the weight.
But, okay, here's my hesitation. If I am letting gravity draw me down and I'm deliberately not catching myself with my muscles, how is yielding not just collapsing into a heap on the ground?
Right, and that is the most common misunderstanding of the concept.
Okay, so I'm not crazy.
Not at all. Yielding and collapsing look similar to the untrained eye, but biomechanically, they are total opposites.
How so?
Well, when you collapse, you lose your structural integrity. Think of a camping tent.
Okay.
If you pull out the central support pole, the canvas loses its shape and just piles up on the ground.
Right, a collapse is a failure of structure.
Exactly. Yielding, however, is a deliberate transfer of responsibility.
You're maintaining your structural alignment.
Yes. Your bones remain stacked in their optimal weight-bearing configuration. But you are letting that skeletal architecture do the job of bearing the load.
Rather than forcing your muscles to burn energy holding you up. So, I am essentially replacing muscle power with structural power. I'm using the innate shape of my skeleton to do the work my muscles normally do.
We really have to ask why we abandoned our structural power in the first place, right?
Yeah, why are modern humans so conditioned to catch ourselves needlessly?
Well, we carry a staggering amount of chronic tension.
Oh, tell me about it.
We spend hours folded into chairs that don't support our anatomy. We stare at glowing screens that trigger low-grade stress responses.
So our sympathetic nervous system is just constantly humming.
In a state of fight or flight, yes, which physically manifests as muscular armor. We are perpetually braced against the world.
And because of that background stress, when we take a step, our brain literally doesn't trust the ground to catch us.
No, it doesn't. We micromanage the descent. We clench our thighs, we tighten our glutes, we lock our lower backs.
Just to manage a completely routine transfer of weight.
Right.
We are micromanaging our own skeleton because we don't trust the architecture to work.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Yeah.
This brief quiet release the author describes, this yielding to weight, is the exact moment we stop the micromanagement.
It's a controlled surrender to gravity.
You're allowing the bone structure to take the hit.
Yeah.
And that surrender is the foundational prerequisite for everything else we're going to unpack in this deep dive.
Okay, so if yielding isn't collapsing like a cut string, then we need to define what our muscles are actually doing during that tiny pause when we settle onto our leg.
Right, because they aren't doing nothing.
No. The source text gives this specific state a name, Maximum Dynamic Relaxation.
Maximum Dynamic Relaxation, or MDR. And the author stresses that this terminology requires careful parsing.
Because the word relaxation carries a lot of cultural baggage.
It really does.
Usually when I hear relaxation, I think of like melting into a couch and going completely limp.
Right.
But the text explicitly states that MDR is not limpness. It is not going slack.
No, the muscles are absolutely still working, and they are working with high precision.
So why call it relaxation?
Well, look at the word dynamic. It implies readiness, potential, and action. During MDR, your postural muscles are engaged just enough to keep your joints aligned and your spine upright.
So you haven't removed all tension.
Right. What disappears during this moment is the superfluous tension.
The superfluous. The extra unnecessary noise.
Yes. The habitual clench we just discussed. The surplus effort we use to safeguard a movement that, biologically speaking, doesn't need safeguarding.
So maximum dynamic relaxation means the physical work of standing has been cleared of all wasted effort.
Leaving only the absolute minimum baseline required to maintain the structural shape.
Okay, here is how I translated this. Think about your smartphone.
Okay.
When it starts running incredibly hot and you notice the battery is draining by a percentage every minute, it's usually because you have like 40 different apps open in the background.
Always.
You have navigation, tracking your location, social media refreshing, games syncing data. They are silently eating up processing power and battery life. Maximum dynamic relaxation is the equivalent of swiping up and closing all of those unnecessary background apps.
That is a perfect way to think about it.
The phone isn't turned off. It's still functioning. In fact, it's functioning significantly better because the main processor is finally cleared of all that superfluous background noise.
Exactly.
The screen is bright, the vital systems are running, but the wasted energy is eliminated.
And if we apply that smartphone analogy to human biology, the battery drain is highly literal.
Because muscles need fuel.
Right. The metabolic cost of keeping those background muscles clenched all day is staggering. It demands constant oxygen, constant calories.
And it produces constant cellular waste, which makes us feel chronically fatigued.
Exactly. Beyond the energy drain, it makes our physical movements blocky and uncoordinated.
How so?
Well, when you have opposing muscle groups firing at the same time, like your flexors and your extensors both clenched because of habitual tension, you are essentially trying to drive a car with the parking brake firmly engaged.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But wait, if I'm hiking up a steep mountain with a 50-pound backpack, my quads are burning, my calves are screaming.
Sure.
There is an immense amount of effort happening. Does this concept of MDR only apply to, like, flat, leisurely walking, or is the author claiming I can be relaxed under heavy exertion, too?
The principle of MDR scales to any level of exertion.
Really? Even on a mountain?
Yes, because superfluous is a relative term.
Okay, explain that.
If you are carrying a 50-pound pack up a mountain, you require a massive amount of muscular engagement to move that load against gravity.
Obviously.
But you only need the engagement required for the 50 pounds.
Oh.
Any tension in your jaw, any clenching in your shoulders, any bracing in your opposite leg that is still superfluous.
Oh, I see.
MDR in that scenario means your working muscles are firing at 100% of what is necessary and exactly 0% of what is unnecessary.
And so the habitual clench is still dry.
Exactly.
So how do we actually turn the parking brake off? Because the text argues that this instant of settling onto the support acts as a window where everything superfluous disappears of its own accord.
Right, we don't have to consciously force the tension away.
Which is a relief, because thinking about relaxing usually just makes me more tense.
That is the elegance of the body's internal feedback loop. You don't have to consciously command your brain like, okay, relax the left quad, release the lower back, soften the deltoids.
So what triggers it?
The physical act of yielding your weight to the support acts as an automatic neurological trigger.
Oh, fascinating.
Deep inside your joints and tendons are mechanoreceptors.
Sensory nerves that detect pressure and load.
Exactly. When those receptors feel that the skeletal structure is securely stacked and bearing the weight, they send a signal to the central nervous system.
The brain realizes the structure is safe.
And it automatically sends a signal to those background apps to shut down.
The window opens and the unnecessary tension evaporates.
But, and this is a big but, the text makes a crucial point here. This window does not open in a vacuum.
Right. The trunk muscles need permission to let go.
They need a specific signal.
And this leads directly to what the author calls the answer of the earth, which, I mean, it sounds like poetry, but it's actually describing a strict biomechanical reality.
It perfectly describes Sir Isaac Newton's third law of motion.
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Exactly. When you yield your physical mass down into the floor pushes back upward with the exact same amount of force.
That upward push, the ground reaction force, is the answer of the earth.
Yes.
So the sequence happens like this. Your leg takes the weight. The leg then passes that upward ground reaction force up through the bones of your ankle, your knee, your hip, and into your pelvis.
And only after that force reaches the trunk do the muscles of the trunk finally relax.
Which brings us to a profound paradigm shift in how we visualize locomotion.
It really does. The author contrasts two shapes to explain this: a ladder and a ring.
A ladder and a ring. Okay.
In the modern West, we typically think of movement as a ladder. It's a top-down, linear command structure.
Like the brain acts as the CEO, deciding it wants to walk.
Right. It sends an electrical signal down the spinal cord to the leg. The leg muscles contract, moving the leg forward and dragging the heavy, passive trunk along for the ride.
The brain gives the orders, and the limbs do the heavy lifting while the core just, sits there.
But natural movement doesn't operate like a ladder.
No.
It operates like a ring, a continuous, responsive environmental cycle.
Okay, walk me through the ring.
The legs take the weight and carry the Earth's upward push into the body. When that upward force reaches the trunk's muscles experience that maximum dynamic relaxation.
Right, the window opens.
And out of that profound relaxation, the actual propulsive movement of the body is born in the core.
Wow.
That movement then ripples outward back to the limbs, propelling you forward into the next step, loading the opposite leg, receiving the Earth's answer again, and the cycle seamlessly repeats.
So instead of a top-down command where the brain orders the foot to move, the legs are acting more like delivery drivers or sensory conduits.
Exactly. Their primary job is just to bring the ground's energy up to unlock the trunk.
They bridge the gap between the earth and the core.
This shifts our entire understanding of where human power originates. Power doesn't come from your brain aggressively forcing your isolated muscles to contract.
True power comes from an environmental loop.
Yes, you are engaged in a constant dynamic conversation with gravity and the ground beneath you.
But wait, what if that ground is uneven? Like, what if I'm walking on a rocky trail or a soft sandy beach?
Good question.
Does this ring model still work if the answer of the earth is constantly changing?
It actually works better on uneven ground than the ladder model does.
Really? How?
Well, if you are operating top-down, forcing a rigid stride, a sudden shift in the sand or a loose rock disrupts the entire machine.
You stumble because your brain's prediction didn't match the reality.
Exactly. But in the ring model, your leg acts as a highly sensitive probe.
Oh, I see.
It yields to the rock, assesses the specific ground reaction force of that exact angle, and transmits that specific data up to the trunk.
So the trunk relaxes relative to the actual support it has.
Not the support the brain assumed it would have. It is an incredibly adaptable real-time feedback system.
And the relaxation of the trunk is the master key that unlocks the door for every single step. The text explicitly states the relaxation of the trunk opens each new turn of the circle, but only after the legs have made it possible.
You cannot just force yourself to relax in a vacuum and expect to generate movement.
Right.
The relaxation is entirely dependent on the physical structural support of the leg and the upward thrust of the earth. It's an integrated mechanism.
Okay, so let me summarize. The ground sends energy up, the leg acts as a conduit, the trunk gets the signal, and it relaxes. All those background apps close, the parking brake is off.
Perfect.
But here is where the mechanics need serious explaining. Because if my trunk muscles are totally relaxed and yielding, I'm essentially a dead weight balancing on a bone structure. How do I not just stay stuck to the floor? Where does the energy for the next step come from if I'm not actively pushing off with my muscles?
This is where we cross from basic anatomy into complex fluid dynamics and biomechanics.
Okay, gear shift.
Because the lead is taken not by the superficial muscles of the trunk, but by what the author describes as the inner pistons.
Inner pistons. Now we're talking about heavy machinery.
It is a precise mechanical metaphor. These inner pistons are set into motion by one highly specific trigger.
Which is?
The subtle bending of the trunk under its own weight during that exact moment of settling.
So when you experience MDR, your trunk isn't a completely rigid, straight pillar.
No, it yields. It bows a fraction of an inch as it accepts the downward load of gravity.
So we aren't completely straight. There is a microcurve happening.
Yes.
Yes.
And that subtle gravity-induced bending activates two distinct hydraulic and mechanical systems deeply embedded inside the core.
The first one being the spinal piston.
Right.
Walk me through exactly how a spine acts as a piston, because that sounds wild.
Okay. As your trunk bends slightly to the side, when you shift your weight onto one leg, your spine naturally curves.
Right.
Between every single vertebra in your spine, you have intervertebral discs.
Those are essentially shock absorbers, right?
Exactly. But we need to look at their anatomy. The outer layer of these discs is called the annulus fibrosus.
Annulus fibrosus, got it.
It's made of tough, fibrous collagen bands. But these bands aren't just straight up and down.
No.
No, they are woven in alternating diagonal layers, almost like a Chinese finger trap.
Oh, wow. So they have a highly specific geometric weave.
Exactly. And inside that fibrous ring is a gel-like center, the nucleus pulposus.
Okay.
When your spine curves to the side, it compresses one edge of these discs asymmetrically.
Right, because of the curve.
And because the center is filled with fluid, it can't just flatten out into nothing. It resists the compression.
So the fluid pushes back.
Yes. The pressure forces those diagonally woven outer fibers to stretch. And because of their diagonal arrangement, when they stretch under vertical compression, they are mechanically forced to shear.
To shear.
To twist.
Wait, really? So weight coming straight down on an angle is physically converted into rotational movement?
Yes. The shape change physically forces the vertebrae to rotate.
That is incredible.
And it doesn't just turn one bone. It creates a cascade of rotation, a chain reaction all the way up the trunk and into the neck.
So you don't have to fire your oblique muscles to twist your torso?
No. The mere act of gravity compressing the specific geometric shape of your spinal discs creates the torque for you.
That is mind-blowing. I'm using the shape of my bones and cartilage to do the work my muscles normally do.
Exactly. And that is only the first piston.
Right. The text also details the second one, the diaphragmatic piston.
And the diaphragmatic piston is even more deeply rooted in fluid dynamics.
Okay, let's map the anatomy for this one.
The human trunk is essentially a sealed, pressurized cylinder. At the top, separating your chest from your abdomen, is the thoracic diaphragm.
That's your main breathing muscle.
Right. And at the bottom, creating the floor of your pelvis, is the urogenital diaphragm, commonly called the pelvic floor.
So I have a muscular dome at the top and a muscular hammock at the bottom.
Exactly. And trapped between those two muscular caps is your abdominal cavity.
Which contains your stomach, liver, intestines.
All those organs. And physiologically speaking, these organs are mostly water. They behave like fluid.
So it's basically a massive water balloon trapped inside a cylinder.
That's a great way to picture it. And a fundamental law of physics is that fluids are incompressible.
You cannot squeeze water into a smaller volume.
You cannot. So when your trunk yields and bends forward or to the side during the moment of settling, the physical space between the top dome and the bottom hammock shrinks.
The volume of the abdominal cavity decreases.
Right.
But the fluid inside can't compress.
It cannot. So the pressure has nowhere to go but out. The intra-abdominal pressure spikes sharply. This massive increase in pressure pushes outward against the deep fascial envelope of the core, against the ribs, and most importantly, against the front of the spine.
Okay, but how does pressure pushing outward against my spine translate to my foot stepping forward? What is the mechanical linkage there?
The sudden spike in internal pressure turns the fluid-filled abdomen into a highly rigid structural pillar.
Oh, wait.
It stiffens the entire core from the inside out, without requiring the superficial abdominal muscles to contract.
So I'm rigid, but not because I'm flexing.
Exactly. This hydrostatic rigidity provides a solid anchor point. As gravity continues to pull the body forward, this rigid cylinder acts as a lever.
I see.
The pressure pushes against the lumbar spine, which tilts the pelvis, and that pelvic rotation is what mechanically swings the opposite leg forward.
The outward pressure translates directly into forward momentum through the levers of the skeleton.
You got it.
So, the trunk relaxes, gravity squishes the discs to create a spinal twist, and simultaneously squishes the abdominal cavity to create a massive pressure spike that stiffens the core and throws the pelvis forward.
That is the sequence, yes.
Those two physical reactions fire us forward into the next step. And all of this happens automatically, purely because we yielded to the ground.
That is the secret of natural movement. You let gravity and your own body mass do the heavy lifting.
The inner pistons convert the downward vertical force of gravity into rotational and forward horizontal momentum.
Exactly.
This specific type of movement, this momentum born from the pistons rather than the muscles, is given a very technical name in the text. Self-Generated Inertial Motion, or SGIM.
SGIM. And every word in that acronym carries weight. The author is careful to explain that self-generated does not mean it happens independently of the outside world.
What does it mean then?
It means that once the movement arises, triggered by that moment of settling and the opening of the window, it flows, propagates, and eventually dies away purely on its own inertia.
Oh, I like this. It's the difference between pedaling a bicycle and pushing a kid on a playground swing.
Explain that.
Well, if you are on a bike on a flat road, you have to constantly push the pedals to keep moving.
Right. That is linear muscular effort.
But if you are pushing a swing, you don't push the whole time. You wait for the swing to reach its absolute peak, the moment of pause, the moment of weightlessness, and you give one perfectly timed input of force.
Yes.
Then you step back, and inertia does the rest of the work as they swing forward and up again.
That is the perfect visualization of SGIM. You are riding the wave of your own mass interacting with gravity.
Wow.
Once those internal pistons fire, the torque and the pressure propagate through your skeletal structure without any continuous muscular effort from you.
You just ride the inertial wave until your next foot hits the ground.
The weight transfers, the body settles, the pistons compress again, and a new wave is generated.
To prove that this entire system relies absolutely on gravity, the author provides a fascinating thought experiment. They call it the space test.
The ultimate proof by subtraction.
Yes. What happens to human movement if you remove the support and remove the weight?
Right. So imagine an astronaut living on the International Space Station.
They are in a state of microgravity.
Exactly. They have mass, but they have no weight.
Okay.
If they try to walk across the laboratory module, they absolutely cannot use SGIM.
Because there is no gravity pulling them down, there is nowhere for their body to actually settle.
And without the downward settling, there is no answer of the Earth pushing back through the leg.
Without the upward push of the ground, the mechanoreceptors in the joints never fire. The
Yeah.
brain never gets the signal that the structure is supported. Therefore, that window of maximum dynamic relaxation never opens.
The trunk muscles can't let go because there is no structural load taking their place.
Furthermore, even if they could consciously relax, without gravity pulling the body down onto a support, the inner pistons have no fuel.
Exactly. The spinal discs do not compress asymmetrically.
The diagonal fibers do not shear, so there is no automatic rotational torque.
The abdominal cavity is not compressed, so the hydrostatic pressure never spikes.
The entire fluid hydraulic engine is completely dead in the water.
It is.
So what is the astronaut forced to do? The text notes that in weightlessness, relaxation yields absolutely nothing.
If you relax in space, you just float aimlessly like a starfish.
Right. To move from point A to point B, the astronaut must manually perform every single action with their superficial muscles from start to finish.
They have to grab a handrail and pull with their biceps. They have to push off a wall by forcibly contracting their quads.
It's an entirely muscular, entirely exhaustive, and entirely linear process.
It is the top-down ladder model operating in its purest, most tiring form.
The space test beautifully illustrates the author's philosophical and biomechanical point. The source is mute without the earth underfoot.
Human biology is inextricably, evolutionarily tied to Earth's specific gravitational pull.
We didn't just evolve to survive gravity.
No, we evolved a highly sophisticated internal engine to harness gravity as our primary propulsion system.
We are biological machines engineered to surf Earth's gravity, which leads perfectly into the next section of the source material.
This is a great transition.
This part genuinely broke my brain the first time I read it.
I'm not surprised.
Because if the legs are merely sensory conduits for the Earth's upward push, and the actual engine driving the movement is the hydraulic pistons inside the trunk, could a human theoretically walk without legs?
It sounds like a Zen riddle.
It really does.
But the source text anchors this in a very real, extensively documented medical observation by a renowned biomechanics researcher named Serge Grakovetsky.
Grakovetsky is a titan in the field of spinal biomechanics.
He is. His theories on the spine as the primary engine of locomotion changed the way we view anatomy.
He fundamentally challenged the orthodox medical view, right?
Completely. Grakovetsky analyzed film of a young man who was born with a congenital condition leaving him completely without legs from the pelvis down.
Wow.
Yet, this young man was perfectly capable of crossing a room on his own.
How does a human cross a room with no legs without dragging themselves with their arms?
He moves entirely on his pelvis,
Okay.
specifically on the two sitting bones at the base of the pelvis, the ischioculturosities.
Right.
And he generates locomotion by rocking and turning his trunk.
And Grakovetsky pointed out that this young man isn't just shuffling or performing a bizarre gymnastics routine.
No, when you analyze the movement, he is unmistakably walking.
He is utilizing the exact same gait pattern as a bipedal human, just utilizing his pelvis instead of his feet.
Yes, this specific observation led Grakovetsky to a conclusion that, as the author states, took immense academic courage to say aloud in a medical community obsessed with leg muscles.
Which was?
Human movement is born in the trunk, not the legs.
I want to pause here to make sure we truly grasp the magnitude of this. We culturally define walking as exclusively a leg activity.
Always.
When someone says, I'm going for a walk, they think about their feet hitting the pavement, their knees bending, their hamstrings firing.
But Grakovetsky's legless walker proves that the legs are essentially just organic stilts.
Organic stilts.
That is exactly their biomechanical role. Legs are evolutionary amplifiers.
Having long legs allows us to cover more distance per stride.
Right, they allow us to step over rocks and logs, and they elevate our head to raise our visual horizon for hunting and gathering.
But the mechanical essence of walking, the rhythmic alternating twisting of the spine, the shifting of the load from side to side, the firing of the central hydraulic engine,
Is entirely contained within the core trunk and the pelvis. The legs just broadcast that core movement to the ground.
So Grakovetsky figured out the what and the where. The movement happens in the trunk.
Right.
But the author of our source text brings a crucial addition to Grakovetsky's theory. The author adds the when.
Yes, Grakovetsky proved the trunk is the source of power. The author of our text pinpoints the exact millisecond the trunk actually becomes the source.
The when is that?
It happens precisely in the moment when the body settles onto its support and the muscles achieve maximum dynamic relaxation.
So even the young man without legs is utilizing the exact same SGIM mechanism we've been discussing.
Absolutely.
He shifts his body weight onto one sitting bone. He yields his weight down into floor. The floor provides the answer of the earth and pushes back up into his pelvis.
His trunk muscles experience that fleeting window of MDR.
The weight of his upper body causes his trunk to bend slightly, asymmetrically compressing his spinal discs to create torque.
And pressurizing his abdomen to create a rigid lever.
The pistons fire, turning his spine and throwing his inertial momentum forward, and he lands on the opposite sitting bone to repeat the cycle.
It is a stunning, undeniable validation of the inner piston theory.
It really is.
It completely strips away the limbs, the fleshy, complicated parts of the body that distract us from the core mechanics, and reveals the raw, central hydraulic engine operating exactly as the author described.
Reading that fundamentally changed how I feel when I stand up and walk to the kitchen.
Right. You start feeling it.
I can suddenly feel the subtle twist originating deep in my stomach and lower back rather than feeling it in my feet.
It's a total re-education of the body.
Now, all of this sounds incredibly modern. We are discussing ground reaction forces, hydrostatic pressure, the annulus fibrosus, and, modern computer-modeled biomechanical analysis from the 1980s.
Very Western physics.
Exactly. But our deep dive takes a fascinating philosophical turn here, because the source text reveals that this exact same biomechanical truth was discovered, mapped, and utilized thousands of years ago.
Yes. This is where the hard science of biomechanics perfectly intersects with ancient Eastern philosophy.
Right.
Grotkovetsky mapped this on a computer in the late 20th century, but if you read the texts of Taoist masters from ancient China, they were describing this exact same hydrostatic pressure and structural torque.
They just used a different vocabulary.
Exactly.
The text introduces the Taoist concept of Wu Wei. If you've read any Eastern philosophy, you've likely seen this translated as non-doing.
And as the author astutely points out, Wu Wei is almost universally misunderstood when viewed through a Western cultural lens.
How so?
We operate under a Protestant work ethic that values visible struggle. We view non-doing as a lack of productivity.
We assume it means idleness, leisure, sitting passively under a tree, or completely checking out.
Or, physically speaking, going completely limp, which takes us right back to our earlier discussion about collapsing versus yielding.
Ah, right.
The Taoist masters who developed profound martial arts systems were certainly not advocating for collapsing or laziness in the middle of combat.
That wouldn't end well.
No. In the specific context of physical movement, Wu Wei is action stripped of the superfluous.
It is identically the mechanical concept of maximum dynamic relaxation.
Precisely.
Wu Wei is shutting down the background apps. It is removing the habitual clench.
Yes. And the text takes it a step further by introducing the phrase Wei Wu Wei, which roughly translates to doing within non-doing.
Doing within non-doing. Okay, break that paradox down for me.
Think about the internal pistons and the yielding we just analyzed. When you yield, the body is working.
The skeletal structure is bearing massive weight.
The spinal discs are twisting under pressure, the abdominal fluid is stiffening the core, and physical momentum is moving you forcefully through space.
There is immense, powerful action occurring.
That is the doing. But,
Yeah.
critically, the body has ceased to hinder itself.
The habitual muscular clench is gone.
The conscious, straining, teeth-gritting effort is absent. The parking brake has been released.
That absence of superfluous tension is the non-doing.
Exactly. So you have massive physical force being generated and executed within a state of profound muscular and mental relaxation. That is doing within non-doing.
The author makes a brilliant connective leap here. They argue that what the ancient martial arts master feels from within this deeply subjective internal sensation of generating effortless power, which they labeled Wu Wei, looks exactly like self-generated inertial motion when viewed from the outside by a modern biomechanist with force plates and motion capture cameras.
It is the exact same biological phenomenon, simply being described from two entirely different vantage points.
One is a first-person experiential description.
And the other is a third-person empirical measurement.
Now, I have to bring this up because anyone familiar with martial arts or traditional Chinese medicine is going to be wondering about it.
Sure.
The text discusses qi. Qi is a massive, incredibly complex, deeply spiritual and philosophical concept, often translated as life force or vital energy.
Right.
The author points out that the invisible force driving this non-doing action is traditionally called qi, but then they immediately tie it back to weight, support, ground reaction force, spinal discs, and inertia.
Yes.
Is the author effectively reducing this vast spiritual concept of chi to just gravity squeezing a water balloon in your stomach?
That is a highly valid critique, and
Sure.
it's one the author actively anticipates. They are very careful not to overstep here.
What do they say?
They explicitly state, I do not set out to reduce all of kind to the mechanics of inertia. It is wider than movement.
Okay, so they acknowledge its breadth.
Yes. They acknowledge that in traditional medicine, qi encompasses breath, blood flow, mental focus, and vital health. But the author makes a very pragmatic, focused argument.
Which is?
Within the strict, specific realm of physical locomotion, the trace of qi, that distinct physical sensation of moving with immense force but zero surplus effort, has a precise, mappable mechanical address in the human body.
So they aren't dismissing ki as a myth. They're saying if you want to physically experience what the masters called ki when you move, here is the exact biological hydrostatic mechanism that produces that feeling.
Yes, the Taoists knew this truth implicitly through centuries of intense generational physical practice and brutal observation.
They knew exactly how to yield, how to open the window of relaxation, and how to fire the internal pistons.
But because they lacked the vocabulary of modern anatomical science, they didn't have MRI machines to view the annulus fibrosus. They passed this knowledge down through the generations using rich imagery, poetry, and nature parables.
Phrases like, move like water flowing down a mountain, or stand like a pine tree, bend like the bamboo.
Those are beautiful, evocative metaphors, and they are incredibly accurate to the internal subjective experience of the movement.
But they present a massive pedagogical problem.
They do.
Because if a student doesn't instantly, intuitively grasp what move like water means in their own muscles, it is very difficult to translate that poetry into a step-by-step curriculum.
I can attest to that.
Me too. If a coach simply tells me to move like water, I don't know what to do with my biomechanics. I'm just going to wiggle my arms around awkwardly and hope I look fluid.
Right. It doesn't give your analytical brain a concrete physical instruction to execute.
And that pedagogical gap is the author's ultimate target. They want to synthesize Eastern experiential wisdom with Western biomechanical rigor.
By taking those ancient parables and underwriting them with a scientific mechanical account, by explicitly explaining the ground reaction force, the necessary relaxation of the trunk, and the hydrostatic pressure of the inner pistons, they aim to create a much faster, far more effective teaching method.
The text notes that this synthesis is the cornerstone of their specific methodology called ISAI.
Exactly.
By understanding the underlying physics, we can effectively shortcut the years of frustration spent trying to intuitively guess what a master means by non-doing.
We can satisfy the modern rational mind by saying, okay, shift your weight. Let gravity compress the specific diagonal fibers of your spine.
Allow the fluid pressure in your abdomen to rise against your fascia and simply ride the resulting inertial momentum.
It bridges the gap between the mystic and the mechanic. It gives our logic-driven, hyper-analytical modern minds the concrete permission we need to finally relax.
Because we now mathematically understand the engineering behind the surrender.
The engineering behind this surrender. That is a perfect distillation of everything we've covered today.
We started by examining a simple microscopic pause in how we take a step, that tiny fraction of a second, where we transfer our body weight from one leg to the other.
We saw how that brief pause, if we actively allow ourselves to yield to gravity rather than bracing against it, triggers maximum dynamic relaxation.
It shuts down the superfluous background tension draining our energy.
We tracked the answer of the earth, the ground reaction force traveling up through our legs, signaling our trunk to relax.
And shifting our movement paradigm from a top-down rigid ladder into a dynamic, environmentally responsive ring.
We dove deep into the biological engine room, exploring how the specific geometric weave of our spinal discs and the fluid dynamics of our abdominal cavity act as pressurized pistons.
Converting the downward pull of gravity into self-generated inertial motion.
We proved the absolute necessity of gravity with the space test.
And we proved that legs are just organic amplifiers by looking at Grakovetsky's legless walker.
Finally, we explored how modern biomechanical science is simply catching up to the profound physical truth that Taoist masters felt in their own bodies centuries ago through Wu Wei.
It is a total ground-up re-education of how we perceive and inhabit our physical form.
It really is.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a direct, immediate application of all this. Natural movement asks the exact opposite of what our culture constantly demands of us.
So true.
When a physical task gets difficult, when you need to move faster, lift heavier, or hit harder, your deeply ingrained instinct is to add effort, to tense up, to grit your teeth.
The next time you find yourself doing that, I want you to try taking away. Release the superfluous tension.
Trust the physical floor beneath you. Let your skeletal structure take the load and let the internal pistons do their job.
And if we step back and connect this biomechanical reality to the bigger picture of our lives, it leaves us with a highly provocative thought.
What's that?
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing the physics of the human body. But the core principles of yielding, of removing superfluous tension, and of trusting the structural support beneath you, these are universal concepts.
No.
If true, undeniable power in the physical body comes not from forcing movement, but from yielding to weight and riding the natural momentum. Where else in your life might this exact principle apply?
Oh, wow.
What mental, emotional, or professional obstacles are you currently trying to stubbornly muscle your way through? What would happen if, in those deeply stressful areas of your life, you stopped trying to catch the heavy bag and instead simply relaxed, yielded to the reality of the weight, and let your natural momentum carry you forward?
That is a profound question to chew on during your next walk. Pay close attention to your steps today. Feel the ground pushing back and see if you can finally notice the pause.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Keep yielding and keep moving.